Welcome to the course on web application attacks. Over the next modules, we will cover the most significant issues relating to common types of web application susceptibility and talk of the ways in which you may defend your applications against attacks. The first module will focus on configuring the computer environment so that it may be used for further presentations and experiments. Let's start with the XAMPP package. Its components include the Apache HTTP server, the PHP interpreter, MySQL database server, a PHP MyAdmin tool for database management, and other tools for developing web applications. We will use the Firefox web browser and find the XAMPP package. You can see here the XAMPP website. Select the Windows installation version. Install the package without changing the default settings. After the XAMPP installation has successfully completed, the control panel will open. It serves as a tool to manage the individual components of the package. We'll pin it to the taskbar to make it easily available for future reference. None of the components are running, so we may safely modify our configuration. To support the editing of text files, install the free syntax highlighting text editor Notepad++. Its features include system shell integration, which makes possible the editing of files through selecting options from the context menu for each file. Let's open the directory XAMPP package. In Apache/conf, you will find the file httpd.conf, which contains the configuration for Apache. The directory modules has been copied to the desktop from the disk attached to the coursebook. You may also download it here, hackingschool.com/get-WHP. It contains examples of the next modules. We'll also include applications needed to illustrate some of our topics. We want it to be accessible from browsers. The configuration file contains the section Directory. It indicates to Apache the presence of a folder and sets access options for each folder. We see here the definition for the htdocs directory that comes with the XAMPP framework. We can copy the definition. Let's now copy the full path to modules and paste it to the copied directory definition. Changing the / convention is also necessary, as the Apache package supports and prefers Linux convention even if it's launched on Windows. We must now logically define the relationship between the path entered in the browser and the defined directory. For this purpose, use the command alias. We can see the calling of the command. Let's redirect modules to the security directory. Now, let's launch the Apache server and check its configuration. Next, start the MySQL server. We can see that the security directory may be opened and accessed. The default page for the XAMPP framework is running. Let's now use PHP MyAdmin. Add a test user with access to the local host. Set the password to test and grant the user access to a database with the same name. All the basic access privileges are granted to the user. Let's also select the option File. Normally, this would not be done. However, for the purpose of one of our demonstrations, this is necessary. The user has been added correctly. We must now import database dump, which will create tables needed in the next modules and add sample data. Let's now install the Havij Advanced SQL Injection Tool and create a shortcut in the directory of Module 20. Next, download the RIPS package for testing PHP applications. Extract it to the directory of Module 20. We now need to download John the Ripper, a tool for cracking and generating passwords. Extract the Windows version to the right folder. Next, we download another universal brute force password testing software, the application Hydra. The software is released as source code, which needs to be extracted to a folder of the right module. To compile it, we need Cygwin. The package enables compiling and starting of Linux applications under the Windows system. Use the default installation options. Select one of the servers containing copies of the Cygwin packages. Take time to pick the right server. Not all servers are equally fast, and installation time depends on the server. The packages we need to install are Make sure all of them are selected and click Next. The installation of the Cygwin package depends on our internet connection and hard disk. This may last quite long, so don't be discouraged. The package has been installed. Open Terminal and go to the directory containing the Hydra source code. Launch the command configure so that the installation script can check whether the necessary libraries have been installed. Next, we may launch the command make, which will perform the right compilation. After the compilation, copy the binary file to the right directory. Launch the Windows System terminal and make sure the application is running. As we can see, the application needs several libraries that are components of the Cygwin package. They must be placed in the directory containing the binary file of our application. The necessary libraries have been added and the application is running correctly. In this way, we've made the environment ready for work and other experiments. Thank you for your attention and see you in Module 2, which discusses the data hiding method. Welcome to Module 2. This module is designed as an introduction to data hiding. What specifically is data hiding? The term was coined for placing data in a directory which is apparently inaccessible for the normal user. The data is not protected by any other attack prevention method. The only security offered by data hiding is its apparent obscurity. The exact location of the data is unknown. What could go wrong? As we can easily imagine, data hiding is far from safe. Anyone who discovers the directories, either intentionally or by accident, may access hidden confidential data. We may compare data hiding to burying a treasure in your backyard. If someone knows the treasure is there, or discovers it purely by accident, they may dig it up and take it. The same may be said of web applications. If we hide data in this way, and by hiding, we simply mean the links aren't viewable or published, the information is still not safe. Data hiding is very often used in conjunction with the robots.txt file. The robots protocol prevents web robots used by search engines from accidentally indexing or categorizing data we'd like them to ignore. Here's what the file could look like. As we can see, the file contains instructions specifying which directories and their contents should be ignored by web crawlers. Unfortunately, the file is quite often used to describe locations containing confidential website data. Many website developers believe that storing such data in robots.txt will prevent them from being leaked by accident. Robots.txt is purely informative, relying on bots to cooperate and honor the instruction to not index specified directories. It is, however, not taken into account by web servers. Additionally, as you can see, any user may access the robots file. If we put confidential information, such as data location, in robots.txt, we practically invite an attacker to try and steal them. The example shows two specified paths, which should not be accessed by web robots. The directories admin and data. A lot of potentially interesting data may be stored there. Let's see what's inside. As we can see, after we have typed in the path, a page opens. We may browse it freely. This is the essence of the data hiding process. The method doesn't give you a link to the page, but if its location becomes known, it may be accessed without trouble. It's the same for the other directory. After you type in the path, you may access all data, which in theory should remain restricted. Although this scenario may seem a bit abstract, web developers often use it purely because it is convenient for end users. If you follow news from the security branch, you may have heard, even lately, of websites which have protected critical data through the data hiding method. This has led to major leakings. Applicants' resumes being leaked from job search sites is an example of problems connected with data hiding. Another example is the American Express website, which left the access to application developers' administration panel unprotected. By and large, data hiding is not a safe attack prevention method. Remember that confidential data must be secured with an authorization scheme. Don't simply rely on robots.txt. The file does not give you a lot of security and may just become the hole through which an attacker slips in. This is all for now. Thank you for your attention and see you in Module 3, which will talk about how web applications may be affected by brute force and dictionary attacks. Welcome to Module 3. This module focuses on brute force and dictionary attacks. These types of attacks are the easiest form of targeting web applications. They consist of checking all possible rule-based or dictionary combinations of logins and passwords. Cracking the password may not take a lot of time, so in practice, these types of attacks are often unsuccessful. The HTTP auth scheme is the first authorization method that may be exploited for attack. It is implemented in all web browsers, and virtually all web servers enable setting it in an easy way. Here, we'll talk of HTTP auth implemented in the Apache web server. The core of this scheme is htaccess, a file used for many purposes, including HTTP authorization. If you store it in a directory accessed by a web server, all the files contained in the directory will become protected with the user ID and password. You may specify the message which will be seen by users and indicate the file containing passwords used for authorization. Let's now try to create such a file. In Apache, the command htpasswd is used for this purpose. Here you may see the syntax for calling the command. To create a file containing passwords, you must first enter the name of the target file. It's good to mention that files with the extension htpasswd and htaccess are protected by the web server by default and may not be accessed by users. Regardless of this, it's better to put files outside the document tree of the web server. Next, we enter the username and password. Our password here is 1234. The file has been created. Now let's see how this works in practice. We'll use the Live HTTP Headers add-on. The extension allows us to view the live communication between browser and server. As we can see, the web server has a set special header, www authenticate, instructing the browser to authorize the user. First, we'll enter an incorrect password. As we can see, the browser encodes the login and password with a base 64 scheme, and a special HTTP header is set. The server decodes the string and compares it against data stored in htaccess. Let's now submit the correct login and password. As we can see, this time the authorization is successful. Browsers remember requests for authorization and the provided data. The information is transported automatically with each attempt to access protected resources. Because of this, no further authorization will be needed. Let's now try to launch an attack targeted at this authorization scheme. To do this, we'll use Hydra, an application that enables dictionary attacking a variety of utilities, including the HTTP auth scheme and web forms. We can see here the description of parameters of calling Hydra. For the parameter L, let's submit the file containing a list of usernames. Let's see what these dictionaries look like. They are simply a list of words which may constitute usernames or possible passwords. We can also see that the files include our login and password. Next, we submit the file containing the passwords dictionary. We also need to submit the address of the web server which will be analyzed and the name of the attack. Next, as a method parameter, we submit the path to resources which require such authorization. Let's now try to start the command. As we can see, the sample attack has been successful. One service has been targeted, 21 login and password combinations, and also our access information have been found. It may be worth it to take note of another authorization scheme. It's a simple login form created in the PHP language. It is displayed by default. If a user submits the form to script, the provided data are compared against the data held by the corresponding variables. To log in, the user must type the username admin and the password root. Let's now see in practice how the scheme is working. Submitting incorrect login and password will cause the message error to be displayed. If the correct information is given, the message logged in may be seen. Now we'll find out how Hydra may be used to launch an experimental attack on the form. indicate dictionaries which will be analyzed by the application. The dictionaries include the correct login and password to our script, so the attempt should be successful. Here, the server name must also be given. This method is called HTTP post form, as the form is passed via the post method. Method parameters are the form's address, data string, and the message displayed with each failed login attempt. Provide the string representing the encoded form after the colon. The value user is changed to logins selected by the application. While pass is similarly changed to checked passwords. We also need to pass the field, Go field, which is used for logging in. Enter the message displayed with the failed login attempt after the second colon. Let's see how this command will work. As we can see, the attack has been successful. The login and password combination has been found. The demonstrated examples used ready-made dictionaries. Let's think what could be done if we didn't have access to such lists, or if for some reason they remain ineffective. The solution is John the Ripper, a password cracker which also enables the generating of password strings for brute force types of attacks. The John MMX version is faster as it utilizes special processor instructions. While it may be quite aged, the application is still fully functional. As we can see, the command may be executed in different modes. We're interested in the incremental mode, which generates character and digit strings. This may prove useful in brute force types of attacks. The incremental mode assumes the parameter mode, which defines character sets used to generate new passwords. Let's start with the standard set digits. You must add the parameter stdout to write the generated passwords to standard output. Alphanumeric characters is the second mode. Another is all, a mode for generating passwords from all characters. Generated passwords are passed to a standard output, although they may be redirected to a file to generate a dictionary. The dictionary may in turn be used as a parameter of calling Hydra. As we can see, the file has been created. So how can we protect ourselves against these threats? The first and most significant solution is to force users to use strong passwords. The stronger the password, the more time a brute force attacker will need to check all possible combinations of characters. Passwords should not use words listed in popular dictionaries. It may often be worthwhile to introduce a scheme for blocking a user session after a limit of failed login attempts is reached. We must remember, however, not to provoke an account lockout, a situation which occurs when users are locked out of their accounts. We'll talk more about this in the next module. That's all for now. Thanks for your attention, and see you in the next module. Welcome to Module 4 of our course. This module will focus on account lockout vulnerability. We'll start with helping you understand the core of this concept. We may talk of an account lockout vulnerability if an authorizing script which monitors the number of login attempts is set to lock user accounts after a limit of failed logins has been reached. If an account is blocked without blocking the IP address used for attempted logins, a potential attacker, who has obtained the username and attempts to log into its corresponding account, may exploit this by blocking the account of a normal user. The attack results in a denial of service and may cause users additional problems. This authorization mechanism is frequently implemented in online banking. If a user submits a valid username but enters an invalid password for 3 consecutive attempts, the account is locked. To unblock it, the user has to contact a branch or call a helpline. The procedure could be helpful in preventing attacks, as the potential attacker has only 3 guesses at the correct password for the targeted username. On the other hand, anyone who has acquired our username may use it to successfully deny us of our own bank accounts. Take a look at the example of how this mechanism works. We can see here a simple website created in PHP. The site employs a simple database-based login mechanism. As we can see, a PHP session mechanism is being utilized here. We're connecting to a database. Let's see if the session has successfully started. If it has, load information from the database on whether the account is locked. If it is, simply stop the execution of the script. Here's the part responsible for logging users out. It deletes the session variable which identifies users. If the session is correct, a displayed message notifies users that they are logged in and may log out. If the session fails, a login form will be displayed. After sending the form, we may load data on the user who is matched to the given login. If we manage to obtain the information, it is processed further. But more on this later. If we're not successful, an error message appears. Now back to finding a user who holds the specified login. If the account is locked, we disable the login option and display a message stating the account is blocked. If the data is valid, declare a PHP session and display the link in the main page. If the provided password doesn't correspond with the password stored in the database, we first display an error message and then check the number of login attempts. First, the field will hold 0. The value will increase with each failed login attempt. If it becomes equal or greater than 2, This means that at least 3 failed attempts have been made. We display an appropriate message and block the account in the database, denying the user access to the account. If the limit of login attempts has not been reached, simply increase the count in the database. As we can see, IP address and special cookies are not checked here, which means that the account will be locked without regard to the computer used for login attempts. Let's see now how the service works in practice. For the purpose of this example, a user admin has been added to the database. The password is test. Let's try to log in using these credentials. We've logged in successfully. We may now return to the main page and log out. As you can see, the mechanism is working correctly. Log in again. Refreshing the page will display a message stating the user is logged in successfully. But let's see what a potential hacker could do with this situation. Switch to the private browsing mode. New cookies will be collected, and so a new PHP session will start. The user is not logged in for this session. The page opens and, as we've predicted, we're no longer logged in. Let's try to imagine how an attacker could exploit this situation. The attacker knows the admin account has been created in this service, either because he made a correct guess or because he acquires this information in some manner. Now submit an invalid password. The message displayed, unsurprisingly, states that the password is incorrect. Let's do this again. After the third failed login attempt, the message states that the account is blocked and the user must contact an administrator. This means that the attacker won't be able to try new passwords. The same message will display each subsequent login attempt. Let's see if this will happen. As we can see, the account is locked. Let's find out how this affects a user who is already logged into a service. Switch off Firefox's private browsing. We're back in the previous session. As you can see, the account has been locked. The session exists in the system, but the database stores information that the user is blocked. We can see that this mechanism could be a source of problems for normal users. A potential attacker could block a user account knowing only the login, and this information is frequently explicitly displayed on websites. All it takes to block a user is to submit several incorrect passwords. If this mechanism is implemented, for example, in an online auction service, an attacker could temporarily prevent the user from bidding in an auction. How can we prevent this attack? Blocking the computer used for failed login attempts is a better alternative to locking users out of accounts. This could be achieved, for example, by tracking and banning an attacking computer's IP address. There's little chance of the attacker and targeted user sharing the same IP address, and on the upside, this approach prevents normal users from experiencing problems, while we're still able to thwart brute force attacks on our service. That's all in Module 4. Thanks for your attention. The next module will focus on web parameter tampering. See you there. Welcome to Module 5 of our course. In this module, we'll discuss web parameter tampering attacks. These types of hacking events occur when manipulated parameters are passed to script, for example through GET or POST, and affect the functioning of a service and lead to unpredicted script reactions. Critical information is commonly referred through hidden form fields. This is especially true of web applications integrated with external payment gateways. A malicious user may exploit this occurrence by intentionally modifying transferred data. If the information is not verified server-side, the functioning of an application could be affected. Let's take a look at a sample script designed to illustrate this problem. You can see here a page confirming the purchase of item number 1234. After clicking Confirm, the purchase will be executed, and a confirmation message will be displayed with the transaction price. Let's now see the HTML source code used here. As you can see, a form is generated which contains an item identifier, and surprisingly, item price. Let's try to change the values passed in the form. For this purpose, we'll use the Live HTTP Headers add-on. First, we need to intercept an HTTP request to the service and use the replay function to change the query and alter the values of the referred parameters. You can see here the content of the form referred by POST along with the price field. Let's try to change the value. As we can see, the price displayed by the script has been changed. If this information was not only displayed, but also used for other purposes, for example, transferred to a payment gateway or used to charge an account, a user could try to deceive the application and modify the amount paid. Remember that critical information shouldn't be made available to users. It has to be stored server-side. All information referred to users may be tampered with and modified by them. This is why it cannot be relied upon. Unfortunately, many websites still use hidden form fields to refer data to payment gateways. After a transaction is completed, they don't check if the actual transaction price equals the expected sum. If critical transaction data is passed client-side, its integrity should be verified by hash functions or other cryptographic mechanisms. That's all in Module 5. Thanks for your attention. In the next module, we'll focus on the path and information disclosure vulnerabilities. See you there. Welcome to Module 6. In this module, we'll talk about the path and information disclosure vulnerabilities. The vulnerability occurs when an incorrect script execution returns an error on a website, which reveals too much information to visitors. While this feature is helpful in developing an application or searching websites for errors, it may at times lead to an information disclosure that enables a hacker to see the full service structure and search it for potential weaknesses. Let's see a sample script which illustrates the problem. This simple script first connects to the database we've earlier created for this presentation, and then includes a second file, main.php. User input entered into the file is used to generate an SQL query that loads articles from the database. If the query is successful, the site will display the article. If it fails, the site displays an error message containing the SQL query which provoked the error. This might be helpful while building web applications. When visitors find errors, they can report it to administrators, making website building easier and faster. Unfortunately, a potential attacker may use the disclosed information to exploit other application vulnerabilities. Let's now see in practice how the script works. The database identifier 1 holds an empty article, so entering this path won't cause errors. What will happen though if we pass an invalid identifier which will cause the SQL query to be syntactically and grammatically ill-formed? As we can see, the generated query is incorrect. 1a is not a numerical value and should be placed in quotes. If this error occurs, the content of the query is displayed. This dangerous revelation allows an attacker to realize that the service may be exploited through the SQL injection vulnerability, a type of vulnerability which will be discussed later. Moreover, the names of the fields and tables used in the database are also revealed to the hacker, which makes the potential attack even easier. Let's go back to our script for a moment. As you can see, we don't check if the ID parameter has been given at all. What could happen if this is not specified? It turns out that the PHP interpreter has returned more error notices. The messages disclose the number of the line which contains the error and file name in the full path. If the file name is hidden through, for example, mod rewrite, the message will display the original name of a PHP file. This exploit may also reveal the service structure with directories and, above all, disclose the path to the directory containing our web application. This could be exploited through a path traversal or PHP injection attack. As these types of data could be very useful for a potential hacker, it's essential to avoid information disclosure. Notice that the connection to the database is executed in index.php, while main.php assumes that the connection has already been set. What happens if the main.php file is launched in isolation? Both main.php and index.php are stored in the same directory, which is accessible by the user. As we can see, the execution of the script is not successful here, as the connection to the database has not been set. This results in more error notices. Let's think of how we may protect ourselves from these types of vulnerabilities and reduce the amount of output data when an error occurs. We may go back to the incorrect query discussed earlier. In that case, we could simply disable displaying SQL queries. While displaying them is a helpful feature for developers, the information should not be disclosed to all visitors. It's better to log the information into a file or only display the query after checking whether the current user has administrator or developer privileges. As you can see, the message has not been displayed now. Unfortunately, this does not solve the problem with returning error messages where no parameters are passed at all. It may be worthwhile to prepare yourself for all possible error scenarios. Errors may occur as a result of a user or service mistake. They may also happen as a result of a potential attacker testing the application for vulnerabilities. In such cases, our script could be called in a way which is not originally provided for. This is why it's useful to protect the application against at least several obvious problems. In this case, we could configure the script to check if a parameter has actually been given. The isSet function audits whether a given variable or identifier has been set. If it has not been set, an error is not returned. Instead, the value false is returned. As we can see, the error message has not been displayed. Let's now look into another scenario, launching main PHP in isolation. To demonstrate the process, we first need to get rid of the protection mechanism we've just implemented. As we can see, error messages are being displayed. We need to make sure that main PHP won't be launched in isolation. Here, you may enter a constant that signifies that the code needed for the script to run has been launched. For example, set the constant header run, which signifies that the code from index.php has been executed and may be utilized. The constant will be set in main PHP only if the file is included from within index.php. Let's see if this produces a change. As you can see, main PHP has not been executed at all in this case. We could also prevent the attack in another way. If the constant is not defined, the execution of script is blocked. If scripts are stored in another directory, you may try to use htaccess to quickly deny users access to these files. Reporting errors is also managed by the php ini configuration file. This is achieved through two variables, error reporting and display errors. Error reporting defines the types of errors which will be reported, while display error disables or enables displaying errors. If it is set to off, errors will not be reported. Let's switch it off. The Apache server needs to be restarted for the changes to take effect. Okay, as we can see, the code does not display errors. That's all in Module 6. Thanks for your attention and see you in Module 7, which will focus on forced browsing. See you there. Welcome to Module 7. In this part of the course, we'll introduce you to the concept of forced browsing. Forced browsing is not technically a vulnerability nor an attack. The term is simply descriptive of a situation where a user doesn't browse through web application resources by clicking URLs, but accesses content by manual identification of resources and may gain access to restricted parts of a service. Imagine a company that sends client emails linking to a page containing sensitive data like the client's personal information, account balance, and so on. This could look something like this. What's immediately striking is the identifier contained in the path. It's a numerical value and could easily be substituted for another parameter. As you can see, changing this parameter will display private information of another client. This could constitute a breach of the Personal Data Protection Act or lead to the leaking of valuable personal data of the company's clients. Another instance of forced browsing is the identification of vital service directories which store libraries, configuration files, and other files used to dynamically generate content. These files should be restricted from final users, as accessing them could lead to errors that result in leaking sensitive data or the script acting autonomously in ways that were not provided for by the application developer. If access to these files is not authorized in any way, forced browsing may also constitute an example of data hiding. Web developers want to restrict users from accessing files, but don't use any other methods of preventing this. In the case of web applications, developers often use common directory names to store service files. An example of such a directory is lib, which could contain library classes or full libraries used by a web application. Another directory is classes. You can also see here unsecured files, which, in isolation, could lead to displaying errors. Other examples are include and includes. The include directory doesn't exist in the service, but you can access the includes directory, which often contains configuration files. If the data is stored in a file whose extension is not linked to any interpreter, or the data is contained in INI or XML files, a user may be able to see the contents of the file and, for example, discover database credentials. Since the consequences of forced browsing could be very serious, you need to remember that while building a web application, you should never simply assume a visitor won't be able to access certain parts of the service. All directories have to be secured, and directories containing data which is only used server-side should be located outside the web server or blocked in an htaccess file. You also need to remember that incorrect file extensions could lead to the leaking of crucial data, like configurations or service source code. Finally, while displaying data to restricted groups of users, don't solely rely on line-generated identification numbers. It might be a better idea to use hash functions to generate less predictable identifiers. Better yet, be sure to implement cutting-edge authorization mechanisms in your application. That's all in Module 7. Thanks for your attention and see you in the next module, which will focus on path traversal attacks. Welcome to Module 8 of our course. In this module, we'll focus on path traversal. A path traversal vulnerability occurs where a user may alter the parameters referred to a web application to determine which files could be loaded by the application. Let's take a look at a sample source code illustrating the vulnerability. You can see here a simple website created in PHP. The contents of the subpage are loaded from a file stored outside the web root directory. As we can see, get is used to pass the name of the file which will be displayed. The file getContents function retrieves the content of the file but doesn't parse it. Notice that an attacker is able to freely manipulate the name of the file which will be displayed by the application. We can see here a website which is working normally. The address bar contains the variable site, which is used to specify a loaded file. Let's see what will happen if we submit the index.php file as a parameter. Take a look at the source code of the page. We can see here the source code of index.php. This is extremely dangerous, since an intruder may use the information to find other code vulnerabilities, or display configuration files that contain critical data like passwords to databases, mail servers, or FTP. Let's try to think of other ways in which an attacker could exploit this vulnerability. Insert the name of a non-existing file. The returned error information contains the full path to the page file. This is an example of a path disclosure vulnerability, which was discussed earlier. We also know that the web server of the site is Apache in the XAMPP framework. This helps us guess the location of the PHP ini. The string / passed at the beginning to the file getContents function in theory restricts the access to the current directory. In practice, by using standard special directories .. you may be able to navigate to parent directories. In this case, we'll climb 5 directories up. As you can see, the contents of PHP ini have been displayed. Using this method, you can access virtually all files stored in the web server, provided that their location is known and they may be accessed by a PHP interpreter. This is an extremely serious attack, which could lead to the disclosure and leaking of critical information concerning the server or the web application itself. Let's see how we can protect ourselves. Whitelisting consists of creating a list of files which can be accessed by a script and comparing the files selected by a user against the list. Another form of whitelisting is specifying the characters expected to be present in the inputted file name. If a user-provided parameter doesn't conform to the specifications of the whitelist, the file will not be read. Unfortunately, this solution is either impossible to implement or simply impractical. As you can see, in this case, an attacker even has control over the file extension. Let's try to predefine the extension. We'll modify the existing instances. After a restart, we can see that the extension has been added permanently to the end of the string passed to the file getContents function and may not be manipulated by potential attackers. In PHP editions older than 5.5.3, it was possible to pass the end of string marker %00, which was included without validation in the string passed to file getContents. This enabled an attacker to delete the added extension. The problem has been solved in newer versions of PHP. In a word, it's important to employ protection mechanisms to prevent hackers from reading restricted directories, even if we assume that the files with allowed extensions won't contain critical data. Filtering out the dot and dot// characters may also be useful. Let's now try to implement this mechanism. The function will delete the dot and / characters. Let's see if this is enough as a security measure. As you can see, all dot and / characters have been deleted, which certainly makes it harder for potential hackers to attack our application. Remember that there's always a risk present if users are able to modify application parameters to change the name of the processed file. That's why all input parameters must be treated with extra caution and be properly filtered. That's all for Module 8. Thanks for your attention, and see you in the next part of the course. Welcome to Module 10. In this part, we'll talk about the Web Parameter Delimiter vulnerability. This vulnerability occurs where a website utilizes a simple text file instead of a database for storing data server-side, and where the text file separates data with a specified delimiter. If the user-provided data logged to the file is not properly filtered, an attacker may be able to tamper with the structure of the database and, as a result, change the interpretation of the stored data. Take a look at this sample code of a website designed to illustrate the problem. You can see here an example of a database file. The first field in the database represents username. The second field represents password. The third, email address. And the fourth field specifies a user type, a user with administrator privileges or normal user. Now let's take a look at a file used for registration in the service. As we can see, a simple form is displayed for user-provided data. Next, a file is opened and the input is written to it. The data is separated with the same delimiter we've previously seen in our database. Finally, the field normal is added, which specifies the user has normal privileges. You can also see here a login script which loads the entered login and password. You can also see here a login script which loads the entered login and password. If the following login and passwords are entered, a database file will open. The file will be separated into more lines via the file function. The function explode separates each file line into different fields. The login and password provided by a user are compared against the stored credentials, and if matching data is found in a line, an appropriate message will be displayed. Next, user type is verified and reported. Let's see how this works in practice. You can see here a login form. Enter the login and password of an existing user. As we can see, the user administrator is logged in and recognized as a user with administrator rights. Let's try to register a new user. Use regular for the username and user for the password. The registration has been completed successfully. Let's take a look at our database now. As we can see here, the information we entered into the browser has been added to the database. Let's try to log in now. As we can see, the login is successful. Now let's go back to the registration form and try to make use of our knowledge about the used delimiter and the database structure. Register the user hacker with the password hack. And the following email address. Add the delimiter character and type in next to it the marker which specifies administrator account. The registration is successful. Let's see what our database looks like now. As we can see, the data in the first fields has been logged normally. But other fields contain the added delimiter and injected administrator identifier. As we see that index.php only loads the first 4 fields, this probably means that the record will represent a user with administrator privileges. Let's try to see if this is true. As we can see, the user is logged in and has administrator privileges. How can we protect ourselves against this attack? The core of the problem lies in the fact that input may contain an injected delimiter, which is used in our database. This could be solved by adding the strReplace function, which serves to delete all delimiters from user input. Let's register a second user now. Use the prepared string. Let's take a look at the database now. As we can see, the delimiter has been cut out and the structure of the database has not changed. In order to confirm this, log into the service. As we can see, the attack has failed this time. That's all in Module 10. In the next module, we'll focus on PHP injection. See you there. Welcome to Module 14. In this module, we'll discuss XSS or cross-site scripting attacks. An XSS vulnerability occurs when users supply data which is transferred to a web application through GET or POST methods is not adequately filtered, allowing for an attacker to inject an external HTML code into the generated page. The HTML may contain embedded JavaScript, which is executed in a victim's web browser. Data, such as session ID cookies, could be intercepted this way. A hacker may also gain access to a victim's computer. The so-called exploit packs are toolkits facilitating the exploitation of browser vulnerabilities. Once a potential victim opens an infected website using a vulnerable browser, the exploit pack installs malware such as Trojans or viruses on the system. XSS attacks are usually divided into two subgroups. Reflected XSS attacks take place when an exploitation string has been sent by a victim's computer through GET or POST whenever they visit a vulnerable page. For example, if the vulnerability occurs in variables passed through the GET method, the victim has to be persuaded to visit the specially crafted website for the attack to succeed. The second XSS vulnerability class is stored XSS. The attack occurs when an attacker is able to save malicious code to a server, for example in a database or a file, which means that a victim doesn't have to be lured to a specially crafted page and can instead be targeted while browsing a normal service, for example while reading website comments or a guest book. Let's now see an example of the reflected XSS flaw. You can see here a simple script which simulates browser actions. Search engines embedded in web applications will very often redisplay the string supplied by users. The same mechanism is employed here. The content of the form is sent via the GET method, and the search result is displayed. Let's see how this script works in practice. As you can see, the string has been displayed. We might notice that user-provided data is not filtered, which means that an attacker has full control over the shape of HTML code, which will be reflected and may use this to inject a JavaScript. All it takes now to execute the code embedded in the link is to send the URL to a victim and persuade him or her to click. Let's now move to another type of XSS vulnerability, stored XSS. You can see here a simple guestbook script. Comments are passed to script via POST and then saved in a database. All comments will be next retrieved from the database and displayed. As you can see, since the script doesn't validate input either, we can expect that it will also be vulnerable to HTML code injection. Since the malicious code will be saved in a database, this would be an instance of stored XSS attack. You can also see here a simple control panel. If valid user credentials are submitted and checked in the database, and the user is logged in, the site will display an appropriate message. Imagine that the browser represents a guestbook administrator. We've logged in successfully. Imagine that the other browser represents a hacker trying to exploit the XSS vulnerability. For the purposes of this presentation, we've created a script which creates a script tag and sets the address of a sniffer, which is a type of software that can capture user-supplied data passed through the GET method. In this case, the sent data is the content of the cookie variable. Finally, the tag is added to the DOM tree. This provokes an attempt to load the script and the sending of the GET request, which will contain cookies. The sniffer PHP file logs all referred parameters to a sniffer log file. The file could be stored in the service which has been taken over by an attacker. In this way, the attacker could obtain access to data stolen from the vulnerable website. In our case, this data is a PHP session ID. Let's copy the script and try to add it to the guest book. As we can see, new elements have been added to the page. The site source code now contains our script. In this case, the code has been immediately executed on the attacker's side. And so the first entry in the sniffer log contains the attacker's session ID. Imagine that a logged-in administrator visits the guestbook page. As you can probably guess, the script which sends data to the sniffer has also been executed on the admin side. The sniffer log file holds admin session ID. Let's try to exploit this. Using the Live HTTP Headers add-on, modify the request sent to the guestbook by setting the stolen admin session ID. As we can see, the attacker has gained control over the administrator session. You probably realize by now how serious XSS attacks could be. How can they be prevented though? The simplest way to do it is to filter all input. User-provided data should be treated with caution, as it could contain malicious elements. If it is not necessary for the users to be able to add HTML tags, we could employ the HTML special chars function. The function converts all special characters used by an HTML interpreter, such as the opening and closing tags or quotes in HTML entities. The entities are displayed normally, but are not rendered by an HTML interpreter. Let's see if setting this function helps. Let's try to exploit the reflected XSS vulnerability once more. As you can see, this time the code has been displayed, which suggests it hasn't been executed. The code of the site contains the AND-LT and GT characters. They are displayed, but not used by the HTML interpreter to identify tags. If you want to allow users to insert HTML tags in your application, using the BB code mechanisms might be a good idea. BB code encloses tags in square brackets and then translates them into individual HTML tags. That's all in this module. See you in the next part of the course. Welcome to this part of the course. In this module, we'll help you understand the concept of XST, or cross-site tracing attack. We found out in Module 14 that XSS vulnerabilities could lead to serious damage. Session ID cookies theft, a usual target for these attacks, had become so common that a special mechanism has been introduced to prevent it. The HTTP-only parameter has been added to cookies, resulting in the sent cookie to be stored in a browser and transferred to HTTP requests, but not accessed by JavaScript. This is served to neutralize many attacks. Let's now see how this mechanism works in practice. You can see here a simple PHP script which sets a cookie and the HTTP-only parameter we've just mentioned. It is initially set to false. We'll cover this part later. Let's now focus on the line which should display the content of a cookie set on the server side. Using the Live HTTP Headers add-on, we're able to see the communication between the browser and user. As you can see, the content of the cookie has been displayed. The contents of the requests includes the set cookie header with the name, value, and expiration date of the cookie. Let's change the HTTP-only parameter to true. Clear the live HTTP headers logs and refresh the page. This time, the cookie has not been displayed and cannot be accessed by JavaScript. As you can see, the HTTP-only parameter has been added to the end of the cookie definition. Virtually all web browsers support the HTTP-only attribute. If it is set by the server, the browsers will block JavaScript access to the cookie, which helps to minimize the fallout from XSS-type attacks. This mechanism was initially believed to be an adequate security measure. A new technique has been developed which serves to circumvent it. This is called the XST, or cross-site tracing method. As we know, HTTP protocol enables sending requests of various types. The most popular among them are GET and POST requests. The head request is also used to query a server for headers only. There are also other types of queries. For example, the trace request, which is implemented and enabled by default in most web servers. The query reflects user headers. All headers sent by a browser, including cookies, are returned as a server response. By using the XML HTTP request object, setting the request type to trace, and submitting the address of the attacked server, an attacker could read the contents of the cookies without using the document cookie variable. Instead, the attack exploits the data returned by text response, bypassing the HTTP-only mechanism. Let's see the site behavior again. As you can see, an error has been reported as a violation of security mechanisms. Many web browsers have lately begun to block less popular and rarely used request types, which could be utilized as a means for bypassing security mechanisms. Disabling trace requests could prevent an attacker from running XST attacks. This request is used mostly by developers to debug browsers and AJAX requests. However, its use in normal applications is so limited that it seems like a good idea to block it. While today XST attacks are nearly impossible to launch, it's still useful to keep in mind the possible attack scenarios and to block trace requests at the server level, either in firewall rules, configuration files, or htaccess. That's all in this module. The next module will cover cross-site request forgery attacks. See you there. Welcome to Module 15. In this module, we'll talk about cross-site request forgery, or CSRF or XSRF attacks. A cross-site request forgery attack occurs when a user who is authenticated on a web application is tricked into unintentionally executing an action in the service. A good example of this is persuading an administrator to click a URL which deletes an account of another user. The administrator is, of course, unaware of this. How can victims execute actions without realizing it? This is what could happen if a specially crafted link is clicked and executed through an exploitation of the XSS flaw we've discussed earlier. Let's now take a look at a sample site code which illustrates this scenario. Assume as a starting point the guest book we've talked about in the module on XSS attacks. This unprotected version of the application allows users to submit any HTML code. The second part is an admin script which verifies if an authenticated user has admin privileges. If this is the case, the script enables him or her to add a user holding the login and password indicated with parameters sent through the GET method. If a user who is not logged in visits such a page, an appropriate message will be displayed. The third script enables logins to a service and utilizes the same database table for authenticating users. If the submitted data is valid, an admin session will be activated. You can see here two web browsers with unrelated sessions in progress, which indicates that there are two different users. Assume that the browser on the left side represents an administrator of an attacked service, while the browser on the right represents a hacker who's trying to gain control over the service. As you can see, the attacker is not logged in and is not in possession of a valid login or password, which means that he won't be able to perform any actions in the service. On the left is our admin. Assume he logs in using admin as a username and test as the password. As you can see, the admin has logged in successfully. Let's confirm this. The attacker is still not logged in. Let's now see what a cross-site request forgery attack looks like. You can see here a guestbook script. Let's submit to it an image, which once clicked, will execute an HTTP request to add a user to the service. Let's take a look at the script. We need to pass the action variable with an add user value. the user variable containing a username and the pass variable with a password. As you can see, an image has been included which hides a link to the admin service in its source. Now, confirm that the attacker is still not logged in and that the account has not been created. As you can see, the account does not exist in the system. Let's assume now that the administrator decides to visit the guest book. The image has not been displayed because its URL refers to a site that is not an image. The administrator could pay no attention to the fact that the image has not displayed, and won't notice that a request has been executed that adds a user to the database. Let's see the result now. A new account has been created for the attacker and he is logged into the service. Try to think of ways in which we could prevent exposing ourselves to these attacks. A good first countermeasure is securing the application against XSS flaws. However, users could still fall prey to such attacks through their websites. To secure an application from performing significant actions in the background in a potential CSRF attack, you can require re-authentication or introduce additionally generated tokens. The database could store random one-time strings, which would be added to all forms generated in a hidden field in a service. This would allow you to check server-side if a submitted token is still active. Thanks to this method, if hackers won't know the currently active tokens, their attacks will be foiled. On the other hand, using only the POST method without using GET requests cannot guarantee application security, as an attacker could use JavaScript to generate a POST request. That's all in this module. Thanks for your attention, and see you in the next part of this course, which will focus on using a browser to spy on data. Welcome to Module 16. This module focuses on the spying of web application traffic. As you've discovered in Module 14, which focused on the XSS vulnerabilities, exploiting these flaws could have serious consequences for users of vulnerable services. User data, such as session IDs, could be stolen and malware could be installed on a victim's computer. As you know, it's feasible to execute any JavaScript browser-side. There are also other means of exploiting these holes. Using several simple tricks, an attack is able to write a script which will monitor all operations executed by a web application user, and which will be active as long as a given browser window is kept open. You can see here a simple code for the sniffer. The load sniffer function launches the sniffer. First, it creates a secondary XML HTTP request object used for AJAX requests. Then loads all links and forms in a website. Let's see the sources for these functions. The collect links function is used to load all link tags from the current document and replace target addresses with JavaScript function calls, where the link's URL is the parameter. In the collect forms function, a form's target address is replaced by a function call which assumes the number of the form of the parameter. Let's now take a look at the load URL function. At first, the send to attacker function is called, which we'll discuss in a minute. Its source is set to the URL which a user attempted to click, and parameters are set to have the frame fill an entire page. The frame is added to the website's DOM tree, and display delay is set to 400 milliseconds. After this time, the site should preload. The script tag is also added, which loads the code of our sniffer. Next, the load sniffer function is called to parse the page. Let's now focus on the send to attacker function. We can see that a referral address is being prepared, which will pass captured data, such as website URL or form content, to our sniffer through the GET parameter. XML HTTP request object references to pages from other domains are disabled in virtually all browsers for security reasons. To circumvent this, a script tag is created and the generated sniffer link is submitted as the URL. Next, the tag is added to the DOM tree, so an attempt will be made to load the script, which will execute the GET request and send data to the sniffer. Let's see the sniffer code now. As you can see, all past parameters are logged in the sniffer log file. As for now, the sniffer log is empty. Let's take a look at the source code for our website. In this case, the sniffer's been injected directly into the code, but it's equally probable that an attacker could have inserted it into the service, using the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. You can see here several links to subpages and a form. The sniffer code is not executed on the subpages. Let's see now how the site works in practice. You can see here the main page. Links have been replaced with load URL function calls. Let's click on the first link. This page has also been parsed by the sniffer. Let's open the second and third links. Now go back to the main page, put a string in the form and try to send it. Let's see the contents of the sniffer log file. As you can see, all calls have been captured, including the values sent through the form. A potential attacker may be able to monitor all operations performed by a victim in this way. Let's try to think of ways in which we could protect ourselves against these attacks. As web developers, we should above all take care of the XSS vulnerabilities. We should also make use of a frame killer. If our page is open in an iframe, the code will redirect an entire browser window to the frame's URL, causing the page to reload outside the frame. In this way, the page outside the frame with all embedded scripts will be skipped. As users, we should be on alert if the address in the bar does not change, even if we have browsed through several pages. What's more, if by hovering over a link we discover that the displayed URL executes JavaScript, we should remain extra cautious. Some newer browsers disable JavaScript access to frames with URLs and domains different than the URL of the window. That's all in this module. Thanks for your attention and see you in the next module where we will focus on session hijacking. Welcome to Module 17. In this module, we'll help you understand session hijacking, which is a type of attack that consists of an interception of a session. Session hijacking attacks allow an attacker to gain unauthorized access to services by taking over the active session of an authorized user. How can this be carried out? As you know, HTTP protocol is stateless. To maintain user state, cookies have to be introduced. Cookies are stored in web browsers and often contain unique user identifiers which are processed server-side to set up sessions containing user information. While an ID is assigned to a specific user, the exploitation of the XSS vulnerabilities we've mentioned in previous modules could allow an attacker to steal a cookie with user session ID to access services. The same could be achieved by using scripts which monitor user actions. Let's see how this works in practice. Take a look at this very simple script. If you visit the admin login PHP URL, the admin variable is set for the current session, which means that the user will have administrator rights. The test PHP file is also available. The file utilizes the PHP session mechanism, and if the admin variable is set, the message hacked will be displayed. The vulnerabilities have been successfully exploited. If this is not set, the message not hacked will be displayed. Imagine that a normal user is being authorized in a service. During this process, a unique session ID cookie is generated and session information is saved server-side. Let's use the live HTTP headers add-on to see communications between the user and server. As you can see, once the login PHP address is entered, a PHP SesID cookie is sent to the server. The cookie is used by default to store PHP session IDs. If the administrator falls prey to an XSS attack or data transmission has been intercepted, an attacker can obtain the content of the cookie. Let's open a private tab which uses a new set of cookies, rendering the previous session inactive. Visiting the test PHP URL doesn't give us access to the control panel this time. Let's use the live HTTP headers add-on again. As you can see, a different PHP session ID is sent to the server. The add-on's replay function allows you to freely modify the sent request. We'll set the admin session ID using the cookie we've previously acquired. Next, we send the request to the server using the replay function. As you can see, the access has been granted. How can we protect ourselves against these attacks? The first prevention method is securing the application against XSS vulnerabilities, as these types of flaws might be used to leak session ID cookies used in our service. Using the encrypted HTTPS protocol will guarantee that intercepting cookies won't be feasible outside of the user's computers. You can also add the HTTP-only parameter to cookies, which should disable JavaScript access to cookies. A frequent regeneration of session IDs is also a good idea, especially after a successful login. Another prevention method is checking the IP address related to the session. The address should not be changing while the session is in progress. If it is, this could point to a potential session hijacking event. Many ready-made scripts implement their own session mechanism which checks the IP address used in a session. That's all in Module 17. Thanks for your attention, and see you in the next module, which will talk about session fixation attacks. Welcome to Module 18. In this part of the course, we'll talk about session fixation attacks. Session fixation is a subclass of session hijacking. Session hijacking involves the interception of a victim's session ID. Session fixation occurs when an attacker finds a way to make a victim, who has access to an attacked service, use a valid session ID supplied by the attacker. If the victim assumes the session ID and is correctly authorized in the attacked service, the attacker could take over the session and gain service access. This is possible in the standard PHP session mechanism. If a user has no session history saved in the cookies and the ID is sent through the GET request, it will be adopted as the new session ID. Let's see a sample script which illustrates this scenario. You can see here two files. Admin login PHP simulates the behavior of a script which logs users into a control panel. It sets the admin variable used to identify the administrator in a session variable. Test PHP is the second script. The script checks if the admin session variable is set. If it is, the message hacked will be displayed. If it is not hacked will be displayed. The echo session ID function, which shows the current PHP session ID, is also set for transparency. Let's now see how this vulnerability works. As you can see, a potential hacker wouldn't be able to access the service. The message "not hacked" is displayed. Session ID is also displayed. The ID could also be obtained by using the live HTTP headers add-on. As you can see, the same session ID has been set in the PHP SesID cookie. Let's use it now. Assume that a cracker has lured an administrator into clicking on a crafted link. The link looks like this. The administrator has logged into the service, and as you can see, the PHP sessid variable containing the attacker's session ID has been passed in the URL. Let's see what the effects of this are on the attacker's side. As you can see, the attacker has gained service access. How can we protect ourselves against these attacks? Preventing session fixation uses similar methods to those recommended for session hijacking. Above all, it is crucial to recheck a user's IP address and other user-unique data. The frequent regeneration of session IDs, or at least the regeneration of session IDs after successful login, is also helpful. By doing this, we make sure that once a new ID has been generated, the ID known by the attacker will become invalid. That's all in Module 18. The next module will discuss the phishing concept. Thanks for your attention, and see you later. Welcome to Module 19, which will examine phishing. Phishing attacks target users and user groups rather than specific applications or servers. The attack consists of an intruder attempting to impersonate entities, such as companies or financial institutions, in order to trick a victim into visiting a specially crafted website designed to look like the legitimate service. The page is instead set up to deceive users and steal submitted passwords and other types of sensitive information. Early phishing attacks mostly targeted bank customers. Attackers try to register a domain similar to the official bank domain, and then set up a website which masqueraded as the legitimate bank page. Next, they sent emails to potential customers of the bank which requested them to log into a service and unlock their account. These attacks have become widespread. You can probably find a number of phishing emails in your mailbox. But what are the distinctive features of these attacks? First of all, the address to which the email will direct us will frequently look suspicious. If you pay close attention, you'll discover typos in the domain name or weird parts at the end of the URL. Since diacritical marks have been allowed in URLs, phishers make use of internationalized domain names to launch attacks. Another key aspect is the look and feel of the service. The layout might differ slightly from the layout of the legitimate bank website. The site could contain graphic errors, and some elements could be non-functional. Early phishing attacks were constructed with painstaking precision, so the forged websites were nearly undistinguishable from legitimate services. Today, phishing emails are sent in bulk, and websites are created semi-automatically, which means that the forged websites will rarely look legitimate enough to deceive us. What's more, these attacks are launched internationally by groups of criminals who frequently don't speak the native tongue of the attacked institution's customers. The messages are translated by free machine translation services and abound in grammatical and syntactical errors. Sometimes they are practically incomprehensible. We'll take a look at some sample messages which serve as a warning. You can see here an attack which targets users of a popular auction service. The attackers have done a good job recreating the design of the service. The address is www.allegro.home.ro. The home.ro top-level domain should alert us. You can see in the image the content of a message sent in a different phishing attack. Everything seems to point to it being sent from Allegro servers. Remember, however, that attackers can use gates which allow them to adopt any email address. To make sure the email has really been sent by Allegro and not by phishers, you should carefully examine the headers which record specific paths used in sending the email. Also, as you can see, the message contains serious linguistic errors, which again should alert us. This is another example of a phishing attack targeting a popular social networking service. The message looks innocent on the surface, but let's pay attention to the fact that the URL begins with www8. Remember that if the sent message is formatted in HTML, the visible URL could be different from the actual address to which you'll be directed. You can see here a message sent to customers of a bank. How can we protect ourselves against these attacks? First of all, you should be careful with submitting sensitive data such as passwords, identifiers, or credit card numbers. Remember that very few companies request such information to unlock an account. This is especially true in the case of banks. You can unlock your account by calling a consultant or contacting a local branch of the bank. Another key point is never trusting the links contained in incoming mail. Even if a link seems trustworthy, it's better to manually provide a known URL rather than click on the link provided in the message. By doing so, you'll be sure that the website you visit is the legitimate service. Then you can make sure whether the information passed in the message, that an account has been locked, was true. If there really are any problems, use the official service and its functionalities to be sure that you don't give up crucial information to attackers. It might also be worth it to check HTTPS certificates. An increasing number of websites use the encrypted HTTPS protocol to verify server identity. You can display in your browser the details of a certificate and check its validity, subject, and issuer. Browsers attempt to verify key information such as expiration date or issuer trustworthiness on their own. You can, however, check by yourself whether a certificate has been issued for the service you're trying to log into. If you suspect phishing, it's good to contact the service administrator and share your suspicions by sending them an original email. This could help in verifying the information contained in the email and protecting other customers. If you want to contact the administrator, remember not to use the reply option, as the email address could be forged. Check the legitimate service page for contact data. Another good idea is to examine the physical URL of a link. Don't rely on the text displayed in the HTML messages. It's safer to copy a target address and make sure it leads to a legitimate location. If the URL seems suspicious, don't visit it. That's all in Module 19. Thanks for your attention and see you in Module 20, which will discuss automated security testing. Welcome to Module 20 of our course. This module will focus on automated web application security testing. The three approaches used in automated software security testing are white box, gray box, and black box testing. White box testing is a technique which necessitates the full knowledge of an application's code and can utilize static code analysis tools. By contrast, black box testers are unaware of the source code and treat the application like a literal black box, where the user parameters are the input and the generated page is the analyzed output. Gray box testing combines the two methods. Testers may know the source code, but don't delve deep enough into analyzing it. The testers could also be unaware of the code but have other information on internal functioning of the application. If that's the case, a gray box tester could come up with better attack scenarios while utilizing the tools and techniques of black box testing. This module will talk about black and white box testing. Since gray box testing is a subclass of sorts of black box testing and is not directly supported by specific tools, it won't be covered here. You can see here the Havij Advanced SQL Injection Tool application, which can be used for black box testing. It serves to detect and exploit SQL injection vulnerabilities. Let's enter as the target the URL of an example we talked about in the module on SQL injection attacks. The entered URL is correct and displays a normal website. As you can see, the tool first searches for a keyword, which is later used to specify if a query has been successful. Next, it identifies the SQL injection attack as an attack on the unprotected numerical variable. The tool has detected that the server uses MySQL 5 database or newer versions. The number of columns used by the query has also been found, as well as the column which will be displayed on the website. The name of the used database has also been discovered. Now we're completely sure that the tested page is vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. Let's use other features of this tool to retrieve additional information on the database. As you can see, the current user has been displayed, as well as database version, current database, host name, installation directory, and passwords for the root and test users. The passwords are hashed, but a potential attacker could take a shot at cracking them. You can also see that the current user has access to the test, MySQL, and information schema databases. Using the tables function, you can load databases accessed by the user and then load a set of tables used by the database. You can also load table columns and the data stored in the tables. As you can see, the tool has automatically detected an SQL injection vulnerability and exploited it without knowing the source code. There are similar black box testing tools used to search for the XSS, path traversal, and PHP injection vulnerabilities. Remember that black box testing tools utilize existing attack scenarios and may not be able to cope with more complicated cases. In this case, the manual analysis of a web application behavior and preparing unique attack scenarios, the methods used in gray box testing, might be helpful. If you have access to a website's code, you could also utilize white box testing tools. You can see here the RIPS framework, a PHP scanner used for testing applications written in PHP. Several files used in previous attacks have been placed in the scripts directory. each containing a different type of vulnerability, such as the SQL injection, XSS, and PHP injection vulnerabilities. Let's now check the results of analyzing the code in this framework. Scanning has started. As you can see, 2 SQL injection vulnerabilities and 1 file inclusion vulnerability have been found. A report has also been generated which contains the number of scanned files and statistics on including subpages. In this case, the scripts are autonomous, but if they included other files, the framework would also scan them. You can see here the number of potential sinks, which are the actual locations where a vulnerability is exploited. These could, for example, be the functions which communicate with databases, or which include files. Functions declared is self-explanatory and indicates the number of functions declared in analyzed files. Unique sources indicates the number of sources, user input parameters. Sensitive sinks specifies the number of vulnerable sinks that are reached by unfiltered user input. The SQL injection vulnerability is the first detected hole. You can see here lines of the vulnerable code, the used parameters. Once you click on the question mark, information on the vulnerability class and the detected case will be displayed. The source here is the get variable, which contains the parameters. The sink is the MySQL query function, which executes SQL queries. If unfiltered source data reaches the sink, this potentially could trigger a vulnerability exploitation. The vulnerability here is the SQL injection flaw. The shown information also includes a description of a given vulnerability case, examples of vulnerable code and exploitation scenarios, techniques for removing the flaw, and other related topics. As you can see, this tool could be helpful in the quick and efficient detection of potential code vulnerabilities. Naturally, the framework could also return so-called false positives, or script lines which are not actually vulnerable in their specific usage. This could happen because a detailed analysis of each case might not be feasible, or because the analysis depends on too many external factors or is simply too complicated. Nonetheless, all information on potentially dangerous locations is valuable. You can view here a report on the second occurrence of an SQL injection vulnerability in the guestbook PHP file along with the similar information. Finally, you can see here an instance of PHP injection vulnerability. You can also find out more on this specific occurrence and the vulnerability class in general. To scan the application for XSS vulnerabilities, switch the framework to a different mode. As you can see, the XSS flaw has been detected. In this case, an SQL injection vulnerability could lead to the injection of HTML code. If we switch the source type to data coming from databases or files, the tool will also detect stored XSS vulnerabilities, such as our guestbook script. As you can see, the tools used for black box testing and white box testing might be really helpful. Remember though, that auditing security needs the experience and brainpower of actual humans, so don't fully rely on software. Rather, use it as additional and valuable help. That's all in Module 20, and it's also the end of this course. I hope that the resources and advice we've given you have proved useful and very interesting. Thanks for your attention. Please feel free to check other training courses which you can find on our website. See you!